Oh yeah, you know what time it is. Grab your six-pack, lawn chair, and get ready for the Fireside Chatot.
All right. So our Fireside Chatot came from a video that was posted. It was an interview with Kelsey. Am I
Kelsey?
saying it right? Yeah,
Yep.
Kelsey.
Kelsey.
The Pokemon Go community manager. Head that says head of community development. Interme. So the person between yeah, there we go. The person that's in between the players and developers, like their job is to go,
She's
I
literally the
guess.
point of contact for feedback. Is the easy
Okay.
way of putting it.
Okay.
But
There we go.
please let me say this because we've already ran off one community manager. Don't go to her personal thing just to yell and scream if you don't like a change in the game. There are proper feedback loops, and we'll talk about that. But just please don't be those people. We ran off one
Yeah.
community manager already, so let's not run off a second one. Especially through this interview, Kelsey seems like they love the game.
Yeah. So there's gonna be no surprise when I say this. I did not watch it yet.
I knew I was gonna tell you
We
he's
even
not gonna
told you
watch
to.
it.
We sent it and said you need to watch this.
I understand. Yeah, I just didn't have time to watch it. I'll be completely honest. I didn't have time to watch it. Um from what I read from you guys, you enjoyed it.
Yes,
The
it was
single
good.
most open and honest feedback we've gotten from Niantic in the history of this game.
That's
And yeah,
that's awesome.
and they reached out. I think that's what I remember from the video, right? They reached out to Nick.
Yes, they reached out to Nick to specifically do this. Was not a sponsored video. This was not something that Kelsey had to do. This was Kelsey taking time out of her schedule to do an interview because they thought this was important for the community to understand.
Mhm. Um Dinho, what was some of the points that stuck out to you from the video?
Um, some of the things that I really liked about it was specifically about Community Day, that they actually got to explain a little bit more in terms of like why they did that and did this and stuff like that. So that was like my main thing about the whole video. I know that it wasn't too PvP relevant per se, but it was still like relevant to the game itself, and it's something that we needed because it confirmed that they're listening now, which is awesome. And this is coming from the head uh person of the what is it, the community development. So this is amazing, like, to me, seeing that. And they encourage you to send feedback. I forget, there was like an email, right,
Yeah,
or a
there is a
form.
actual feedback loop. I will make sure Astro gets the link to it. I'm also going to, for those, we try not to directly interact with Twitch too much, but this is important enough. For those that are in Twitch right now, I am going to go ahead and drop that in Twitch chat. And one of the things that Kelsey pointed out was if you send them feedback on Twitter, they try to read it, but Twitter becomes a noise box. And they specifically said every piece of feedback submitted through the official help shift actually gets read, reviewed, categorized. So that to me is huge. One of the other things is talking about Community Day. They mentioned that the data, we heard the 5% thing from that original article, but the actual drop off that was not mentioned in the article was after a 3 hour period. And they did point out it was a consistent 3 hour period, not I play an hour here, then go do this, then play an hour there. After a 3 hour period, less than 2% of the player base was still playing.
Hmm.
So 5% played the entire 6 hours. After 3 hour periods, less than 2% were still playing.
Interesting.
So hey,
Yeah.
I appreciate being given the hard statistics. And one thing that Kelsey mentioned was specifically they look at data. Niantic is a data-driven company. So it's really important that when they talk about the data, they actually are really focusing on that. Now, with that being said, they're still looking at the data from these most recent community days to determine what will happen in the future. So, once again, go to that Help Shift article and give feedback, but give, as they put it, constructive feedback. These are the problems. This is why it's a problem. These are some possible solutions that would help with this. Be constructive in your feedback, and that goes further to getting the game fixed. That was something that they specifically mentioned in the interview.
Yeah, one thing that I picked up on that I don't know how I felt per se, just because I was thinking a little bit too far into it, was the kind of choose your own play style for what 3 hours you want to play out of that day of community day. The only thing I would say like about that, it would be like it may be an issue of like how many hours afterwards you got to evolve it, like, and if you don't coordinate, I guess, with people that you play with and stuff like that. So that's one thing that I was kind of curious how that would work if they were to go upon proceeding with that.
Yeah, I thought that was an interesting point as well. That the feedback was heard there, and they did consider. And the point that was made there was they don't want it to hurt the community, but they also understand around accessibility, which was another huge talking point of the video, was understanding that the accessibility of the game, exactly being said, is not there yet. That there is an accessibility issue with the game. That was actually mentioned and said by Kelsey.
Yeah, and that she did mention. I mean, they mentioned that it was a thing they're working on, and I believe that they want people that have issues, with that to reach out. I believe through that same link, I believe, or a different one.
So that is a campaign that they want to start here soon. That will be a specific survey sent out to the player base. So if you, and they're not talking, if you identify as disabled, whether that is, physically disabled, mentally disabled, they're not trying to paint a picture of what quote unquote disabled means. If you identify as a disabled person or someone that has accessibility issues, Niantic wants your feedback. Kelsey wants your feedback because this is a big item that they know needs addressed. And they don't have a timeline on addressing that still. So keep that in mind. But one of the things they're talking about with accessibility wasn't just people going out and being able to play, but also the accessibility to people that live in different areas. So they mentioned during the interview that they were originally from more of a rural area and was having to drive over 30 minutes to get to a Pokestop. So how do you make the gameplay loop and the accessibility from that aspect still work for all the player base while not making those that are in cities overpowered in their play loop?
Yeah, that's pretty tough. They did mention something that also made sense because I think we also had to deal with this, that you can't really make the whole community happy because that's impossible. I know that we struggle that a couple of times as well, trying to make other people happy, but we kind of come into it like something in the middle for our community that we have, and I feel like that's when I understood how they are now. And it's true. I mean, a lot of people, you're not going to make everyone happy with the decisions that they make.
Yeah, and I think one of the things they were talking about as well, specifically around that, is anytime they take time away from the or take time away to handle accessibility issues, that takes, and anyone that's in software development knows, that takes away development cycles from doing other things. So that slows down progress in the game from happening.
Yeah.
So it's a
Yeah.
trade-off anytime they're going to prioritize patching a bug, fixing GBL. That is the less time they're able to spend on the next new feature coming to the game. So
Yeah.
it's important. Just looking through my other notes here. I think that was really the big point. And this was once again mentioned before. Niantic cares about data, and right now, data is lacking on the accessibility items. We know there's been some initial feedback, some initial things given, but they're looking to figure out and actually quantize the data and start to get better results. So that's the reason you'll see surveys come out hopefully soon, but there is no, like I said, no immediate timeline.
Yeah.
Oh, I think it's also important to mention Kelsey joined the company in January of this year. So they joined post Hear Us Niantic. They were a part of the player base during the whole Hear Us Niantic campaign. And they've actually spent their entire career in community management and said specifically, it was like watching a train wreck and seeing it from both sides of it now, from internal and external, seeing how that was handled. Niantic knows it was an issue. Niantic knows they screwed up. And one of the things they'll talk about more when we get to some of these other things is specifically around how do they fix that going forward. So, Dinho, anything about keeping the game fresh? I know they mentioned one thing specifically.
Yeah, they mentioned something about the buddy system for higher level. I guess more for like level 50s, I believe. And that's one thing. I mean, I personally wouldn't understand it, but it made a lot of sense because they mentioned something in regards to after you hit level 50, like they're like, what now type of thing. So it's something where they want to have the level 50s help the community or somebody local, I guess, local community, in terms of, I don't remember the exact details of it, but in a way where they can help other people's, I guess, get better or get higher level. I'm not too sure of how they would do that, but I know that they're working on a system for the level 50s actually not to get bored.
Yeah. So the other point that was made during this was specifically around community and what that means and how, because every time you hear Niantic talk about community, they always talk about strengthening quote unquote local communities. And one thing that they mentioned was specifically, why can't there be both? Why can't there be robust, strong online communities? Hey, BTW Discord, as well as robust, strong local communities. And they're trying to figure out the game balance of how to work on that. But one of the things that they mentioned specifically here was they know they've dropped the ball on communication, specifically around the instance changes. They promised us 30 days. Niantic promised us 30 days. We were giving mere hours for all intents and purposes. Kelsey specifically committed to not letting that happen again. So they actively are trying to manage that situation. They know that was a huge mess up on their side. They're owning it. This is one of the reasons I was so appreciative of how many times have you heard Niantic say, "Oh yeah, we screwed up." They don't.
Almost none.
Yeah. So the other thing that they're looking to do is start to shift players' focus on how to play the game and figure out how to align how Niantic wants the game played versus how players are actively playing a game. And that is something you'll start to see roll out slowly over time, specifically around rating. So keep that in mind. So maybe that is what we're seeing the Rare Candy XL show up in rating all of a sudden. I would like to see that communicated, but
Yeah,
maybe
I
that is
was
part
gonna
of that
say that.
slow peel back. They also mentioned that a major game changing announcement was coming and they couldn't talk specifically about it. I think that was probably the mega energy and mega change
Yeah, I
because
think
this
so.
interview was done during Stuffle Community Day.
Mm, okay.
Okay. Anything else there?
Yeah, they just mentioned. I think TrainerTips mentioned that he was asking about the regarding the player drop off. I guess the how much it dropped off since, I guess whenever it was before. But they mentioned that they don't really have stats on it, but do recognize that the game can't be everything for for everyone. So it makes sense, and he also mentioned TrainerTips mentioned a lot of like keeping it's not the same for an OG player versus like a newer player.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that I picked up on, and it makes sense because something that will make us happy as an OG players because we understand how it was before when it first started everything versus how it is now, and they won't know the experience it was how it was before.
Yeah, and the other thing that was kind of mentioned as well is um, that long term they have to figure out how to stretch the game, and that's why we start to feel that it is, as we say as the long term players, drip feeding us new content. But this is also supposed to be a, lifelong game as far as Niantic's concerned and the Pokemon Company's concerned. So just keep that in mind. So anything else there before we head over and start into the questions?
No, I just think it was a really good interview and really enjoyed it for sure.
Cool. And I will put a link to that interview in the show notes,
And the Health
and
Shift
I will
article.
be watching it. Yep. And I'll be watching it tonight before I go to bed. Because I'm looking at this and there's a lot of stuff that I'd like to hear. Not that you guys didn't do a good job at saying it, but
Yeah, some
hear for
small
myself
details.
yeah,
I
everyone.
will say, if Kelsey, if you're listening, we would love to have you on the show sometime.
For real.
We're not part of the community program. We know that, but getting your thought process on the state of PvP and how that community is part of here too, I would love to hear that. So if you're listening, or if you work for Niantic and you can pass this along to Kelsey, let them know we want
Yeah.
them on the show. We want to actually have that chance to talk a little and represent the PvP side of the community.
Yeah, and then you'll get to answer fun questions like what we have in this next segment, and it'll be awesome. So let's do that.